Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, after a series of disappearances, the police were finally led to a house, right in the middle of the remote Pennsylvanian countryside. At first they were, having a look around and nothing seemed amiss. Then they were told, look over there. They did so. In fact, they wouldn't stop digging for a long ass time because they found a hell of a lot more than they were expecting to. And the owner of the house, one Hugo Selenski, he's probably the scariest serial killer you've never heard of.
An accused double murderer is on the run.
Before we get into it, please click that little old subscribe button to see new videos every single week. Now, let's give it a go. It was Halloween 2001, and the ghosts, the ghouls, and the goblins, all those young fellas, they were out and about. But you know what at Halloween? What I've seen time and time again telling these true crime stories is that the real horrors can often go unnoticed, which is exactly, if you can believe it, what happened to one Hyung Jong Sung. Hyung Jong went by Cindy, and she was raised in Seoul, South Korea, moving to the US of A in 1995 to live with her aunt and uncle in Virginia. After graduating high school, she went to Penn State University, studying integrative arts. And it was while she was attending a party on Halloween night in 2001 that Cindy Song vanished. That night, it was a Wednesday, Cindy and her buddies, they were out, having a good time. They were booping and a bopping at a place called Players Nightclub. Now, this is in the town of State College, home to Penn State University. They had a grand old time, they were giving it sucks, and then they left the nightclub at about 2 a.m. They went back to a friend's house, and then they were gaming all night till about 4 a.m. Everyone was having a good time. Cindy, she was dressed up as a bunny, she had the ears, she had a tail, she had the whole kit and caboodle. So it was at 4 a.m., which I think they call the wee hours of November 1st, that Cindy was dropped off at her home, at her place, on Clinton Avenue. She was dropped off outside her door. They said, catch you later. And Cindy was never seen again. Later on that very same day, November 1st, Cindy's roommate, who was out of town, returned and saw nothing out of the ordinary at their place. No signs of anything amiss. The doors were locked in the apartment. It would be a couple of days before the police would be called and a search would begin. Now, Cindy definitely came home. She definitely, entered her apartment. Inside her place, they found the backpack she'd been wearing that night. Her fake eyelashes were, on the countertop. So it appears she had been dropped off at 4 a.m., went there, and then left of her own accord. Her keys and purse, however, weren't in the apartment, so her friends, knowing Cindy, suspected she had probably popped out early that morning to a nearby 24-hour convenience store to, get a snack or something. And either going to or coming from, something happened. Footage from the store wasn't able to be recovered, as by the time the police got there, it had been overwritten. Her phone records and emails were checked, nothing seemed amiss there. She'd ordered a new computer that was on the way, so her leaving of her own accord, well, chances of that seemed slim to nil. Searches were undertaken in the nearby woods and surrounding areas, but nothing was found. It seems like old Cindy just vanished. But then, something really weird. A couple of days after, Cindy went missing and the news reports were out there, an eyewitness came forward. This eyewitness said they believed they saw someone who resembled Cindy, but this was over 200 miles away in Philadelphia. She had said that very early on the morning of November 1st, she saw a woman matching Cindy's description being forced into a vehicle in Philadelphia's Chinatown district. She said the woman was screaming, and then the guy who was doing the forcing was shouting at this witness to basically get the hell out of there. Now, how Cindy would have gotten from State College to Philadelphia in those couple of hours remains unknown, but a sketch was done of this person. It was provided by the police. So, who took her? Was it just a random crime of opportunity, or was it someone Cindy knew, who knew all about her and was able to get her out of her apartment? But that was it. Nothing more was found about Cindy. And speaking of people knowing things about you that, you'd rather they didn't, this whole video is sponsored by Aura, my friends. Do you ever find, that your personal and private information has gotten to places You know, it really shouldn't have. Getting emails and spam after spam after spam, and not the delicious kind. Well, guess what, hotshot? Data brokers will sell your information to spammers, to scammers, to anybody else who may want to target you. I'm talking banks, insurance companies, predatory lenders, the feds, etc. You never know. Anything someone might want to know about you, maybe they already do. That's why I personally have been using Aura for over a year. Aura gives me a heads up to which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. It not only greatly reduces my spam, but it also helps, protect me against any nefarious bad boys out there who may want to hack, steal, or access my information. Well, guess what? Not today, pal. Not only that, folks, Aura has all the good stuff. I'm talking real-time alerts of credit inquiries, malware and virus detection, a VPN, password manager, and even parental controls if you have little ones. Even with all these features, it's really easy to set up, and best of all, I get everything at one affordable price. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online, and if you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link down in the description. That link is aura.com/thatchapter. Aura has an A+ BBB rating and is highly rated in the Apple app and Google Play stores, so you know they're going to take really good care of you. Once again, use my link down in the description. That is aura.com/thatchapter, and be absolutely horrified by how much of your private information is out there on the internet. But you know what? Aura's got your back, so it's all good. Now, let's get back to the video. About 2 years passed since Cindy's mysterious vanishing, and something shady was afoot in northeast Pennsylvania. See, there had been a spate of burglaries. Back Mountain is about as rural as it gets without it being just, one of the big old empty fields, and it is in Luzerne County, Pennsylvania. It's about a 30-minute drive from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and the only reason anybody knows that is because of the office. And, Back Mountain is kind of a place where, unless you live there, you have no reason to be there at all. I know you're excited, but that's where we are for this one. After finishing work at around 2 a.m. on March 25th, 2003, at her uncle's pub, Dugan's, Ellen Smacka had returned home about 15 minutes later. There, at her home, Ellen was confronted by 2 masked men who were waiting outside her house for her. They attacked her, they grabbed her, and they grabbed her purse, and they made her purse contained about $600 in tips she had made that night. It was all over in a couple of seconds. Terrifying, and it sucks to lose that much money, especially when you're robbed outside your own front door. And then Ellen obviously freaked out. She went into her own house anyway. She began checking. She found some expensive bottles of alcohol. Fuckers are taking them too. The one time you need a drink. Though days later, strangely, her purse just magically appeared at the bar, Dugan's bar, though, minus the $600 she had made that night. 2 months later, Ellen's house was robbed again. This time $900 were taken. Poor Ellen. Right? And it would turn out that a year before, she'd been robbed previously. Her car had been broken into and $600 had been yoinked out of her car. Ellen was fuming. She was pissed off, as you can imagine. So she went to the police. And again, rural area, that kind of stuff. So the cops asked her, listen, who do you think could be doing this? She says, I know exactly who's doing this. It's friggin' Hugo Selenski. Selenski was dating Ellen's then best friend, Christina. And she had known him since high school and was aware of his reputation and had heard about him committing other thefts. Ellen had noticed, that Hugo, as I said, dating her best friend, but he would disappear for long stretches of time and then come back. Jesus, full of cash, splashing around. Well, he never had a job, ever. Ellen also said, Hugo knows where I live. He knows probably my schedule. He knows where I work. He knows that I make a lot of money in cash, right, from tips. So, guy with a history. And guess what? Hugo has a accomplice, right? This guy named Paul Weekly, who also has a history of burglaries. Fucking Dumb and Dumber, the gruesome twosome. Hugo Selensky and Paul Weekly had served time in prison together and had remained close on the outside. And Paul had even been staying with Hugo Selensky and his girlfriend Christina. So that was enough for the police to look into both Hugo and Paul Weekly. Were they the neighborhood burglars? Let's find out together. As I said, it didn't take long for the police to find out that Paul Weekly had a long and a beautiful tapestry of history, of burglaries. In fact, he was up shit creek for one right now. He's facing charges, when they began looking at him. Then something odd. The investigating officer, they went and they spoke to Paul. were you robbing Ellen's place? They were specifically investigating the night she'd come home, and $600 were taken and some expensive bottles of alcohol were taken then. And Paul, he, was like, go F yourself. But he did ask the investigating officer one question in particular. He was like, riddle me this. Are there many unsolved murders, in the county, by any chance? Anyways, so the police were looking at Selenski and Paul weekly. Hugo Marcus Selenski was born on August 1st, 1973 to parents Ronald and Ruth. To say our lad Hugo was a bit of a wrong one right from the start, that's an understatement. In high school, he was literally voted most likely to spend the rest of his life in detention. He'll spend the rest of his life doing a lot more than that. And even his name, Hugo Selenski, he sounds like a serial killer. Now, as I said, both Hugo Selenski and Paul Weekly denied being involved in the burglaries. As I said specifically, that one burglary, Paul, he actually, in fact, because he was facing charges for other burglaries, he had an ankle monitor on him, so he could provably say he wasn't there. Police didn't really get anywhere with either of them. But then, get this, 7 days after their initial questioning, Paul, he calls with detectives and here, listen, you're gonna want to hear this, right? He was willing to talk to the police about some things maybe he knows if he would get a reduced sentence because he had such a long history of burglaries, he was probably gonna, do a lot of time now at this point. So investigators sat down with Paul Weekly and they were like, yeah, here, shoot the shit, tell me a story. And Paul said, yeah, Hugo was one of the people who had robbed Ellen that night. And the other was a guy named Patrick Russin. See, Paul Weekly said that the three of them had been drinking when Patrick Russin and Hugo Selenski decided to go out, only for them to return a while later. And now they had a whole bunch of cash and a stack of expensive bottles of alcohol. Not only were the things Ellen was missing from her home, but while Paul was talking to the investigators about what had happened, he told the investigators, call Ellen right now and ask her where her high school diploma is. The police did so. Hey, Ellen, where's your high school diploma? And she's like, I'm going to have a look for it. Boom! Paul, I got it right here. Proving that his story was true, that they had stolen money, they'd stolen alcohol, and stolen her high school diploma, which is a bit of a dick move. And then Paul Weekly had to say, guess what? Right, you get this. Burglaries are only the tip of the mother effing iceberg. Paul Weekly said that Selenski was a serial killer and needed to be stopped. According to Paul Weekly's statement, Hugo Selenski had killed at least 2 people that he knew about. When asked who the victims were, Paul Weekly gave the names of missing local pharmacist Michael Kurkowski and his girlfriend Tammy Fassett. Their disappearance had been big news in the area. They'd disappeared a couple of years prior. Nobody knew what happened to them. Now they were about to find out. Michael Kurkowski had been running his own pharmacy, the Medicine Shop, since he graduated from college in 1999. From the outside, he seemed to be, the generic American family man, doing it all. That is until April 20th, 2001, when police raided the pharmacy as part of an investigation into illicit prescriptions and black market pain pills, and he was arrested and charged. Michael had lost his job and marriage and was soon facing years in prison after being convicted in February 2002 for distributing a controlled substance. The only upside for Michael was meeting a new woman, 37-year-old Tammy Fassett, who was working as a waitress at a bagel shop when she met Michael. And despite his illegal woes, she fell head over heels for him, vowing to stand by him. 3 months into the relationship and just a few days out from Michael's sentencing, news started to spread that the two had disappeared. Obviously, everybody's gonna think, Michael's literally about to be sentenced and go away for a couple of years. He ran away. Him and his new missus, they ran away with all the money he had stashed from selling, all the black market pain pills and shit. That was what the police believed. They were like, they're down old South America way. We'll never see him again. But we'll get him next time. Now police were being told they actually hadn't gone anywhere. That Hugo Selenski had killed them both. Weekly told the police that Selenski had visited him on May 5th, 2002 and solicited his help in moving the bodies from behind the high school where they buried them and moving them to somewhere less likely to be stumbled across. Selenski told Weekly that himself and Pat Russin had killed the two. He thought that Pat might turn him in, so he wanted to move the bodies just in case. So the two of them dug up the bodies and reburied them in Selenski's backyard. See, one of the last conversations anybody had with Tammy Fassett before she vanished was at her own mother. She'd been on the phone to her. And Tammy said, they were yapping away, whatever. And then Tammy said, listen, I gotta go. There's 2 guys here. She didn't know who they were, but it's 2 guys here. And that was it. In addition to this, Michael's parents, they also spoke to the police. Because, like, during Michael's trial for, selling illegal pills and shit, he had come to his parents' house one day with a guy his parents didn't know. That guy was Hugo Selenski, and he was like, listen, this is my best mate, Hugo Selenski. The sun shines out of his arse. He's so great. He's gonna help me, during the trial and beat this whole case. It's great. And that was that. Then Michael and Tammy go missing, and 2 months after their last scene, when everybody believes they've done a runner, Hugo Selensky turns up again at Michael's parents' house. And he wants to speak to Michael's dad, whose name was Mike Sr. He's like, listen to this. I know where Michael and Tammy are. They're laying low, they're on the hiding from the cops. But I know Michael gave you a load of money that he had, stashed from his pain pill operation. So if you just give me some of that money, I can give it then to Michael because he needs it, he's on the lam. He told Mike Sr., I need $30,000, right, that I'll absolutely positively give to your son who needs it to beat this whole thing. Now, Michael Jr. had in fact given his dad $100,000 in cash secretly to stash away from him. So Mike Sr. was like, yeah, I've already met you before. My son said the sun shines out of your arse. Of course, if it helps my son, take as much money as you need. Hugo did this multiple times, returning for 30 grand, returning for 40 grand until the 3rd visit, when Hugo says, I need some more money to help out your son who's hiding it. And this time Mike Sr. was like, how do I know you're not bullshitting me? I haven't spoken to my son. Apparently you're the only person who knows where he is. What's going on here? Mike Sr. even gave Hugo a list of questions, that only his son would know, and he wanted answers back. Well, next time Hugo returned, he just pulled out a gun and said, give me all of the money. He did so, as you can imagine. Now, of course, Mike Sr. could have gone to the police sooner, about Hugo Selensky, and Hugo could have been caught much earlier, but Mike didn't know if Hugo was telling the truth or not. So that's why he didn't, say that he's robbing me or that maybe my son's not even alive. On June 5th, 2003, police served a search warrant at Selensky's home address at 479 Mount Olivet Road, Wyoming, PA. The police went over the house with a fine-tooth comb and at first seemed to be coming up empty-handed. That is, until Paul Weekly told them exactly where to dig. The excavation team quickly recovered the bodies of Tammy and Michael. The cause of death was later ruled to have been asphyxiation. The 2 victims had cable ties tightened as far as they would go around their throats before being left to die. And that was only the beginning of what they found in Selensky's yard. Not only did they find the bodies they were looking for, they also found a whole host of burnt bone fragments, which at first estimate was believed to have come from as many as 10 different people. It would ultimately be determined that it was in fact Paul Weekly and Hugo Selensky had gone to Michael's house to get the money they knew he had hidden from his drugs operation, and Michael wasn't going to leave alive. Tammy she was just there. She was collateral damage. Michael and Tammy were both tied up. Tammy was taken to the bedroom and Michael was beaten and tortured with a rolling pin and cable ties to get the location of his cash out of him. Ultimately, though, Michael said, I don't have the money on me, it's with my dad. Guess what? 2 months later, Hugo would go to his dad, demanding the money back, saying Michael's alive, when in fact, after Michael told him where the money was, Hugo put a zip tie around his neck, Tammy's neck, just let them die, slowly and painfully. The bodies then ultimately ended up in Selensky's backyard. Hugo was arrested in October 2003 for the 2 murders. But then, get this, just a couple of days after he was arrested and put in jail, Hugo managed a daring little escape from the Luzerne County Prison. This was on October 10th, 2003. Himself, Selensky, and another inmate, they managed to get out of the bars, right? They used a broom to prise them open, and then they made a rope out of bed sheets. Started scaling down the wall. Now, the other prisoner who escaped with Hugo, I guess he wasn't quite as good because he actually fell, had to be airlifted to a hospital, and ultimately is now a paraplegic. Hugo, though, was a little bit more adept at it, and he made it.
shocked and alarmed and very concerned right now.
The Luzerne County District Attorney talks about last night's prison break in Wilkes-Barre. An accused double murderer is on the run. Hugo Selenski escaped from the Luzerne County prison late last night.
This is the man that police are out looking for now. Every available unit in the area out looking for this man, Hugo Selenski. As you said, he is accused of 2 murders so far here in Luzerne County. He was right inside the jail you see behind me last night. That is until about 10 o'clock. That's when he and his cellmate repelled from their top-story cell down a rope made of sheep. Massive manhunt begins. Boats take to the Susquehanna River. Dogs try to track down Selenski's scent. State, local, and federal police fan out around this part of Wilkes-Barre and other parts of Luzerne County.
He was able to climb the external fence's razor wire topped with a prison mattress and climbed his way to freedom. He made his way to his aunt's house 8 miles away from the jail, where she helped hide him out for a day before he left and returned to the house where he committed the crimes. Selenski turned himself in after 3 days on the lam. He actually ended up not even facing sentencing for the escape after the district attorney was found to have made a whole bunch of errors related to the speedy trial, and the whole case was thrown out. 2 more victims found in Selenski's backyard would also be identified. They were both gang members. One was 29-year-old Frank Rudy James and 22-year-old Adie Redmond Keeler. Over the next 20 years, Hugo Selenski would face trials for the 2 double murders. Keeler and James were up first. In multiple interviews and again at trial 3 years later in March 2006, Selenski's former friend, 33-year-old Patrick Russin, testified that he saw Selenski shoot both men with a 12-gauge shotgun. The motive? Drugs and money, not much else. The March 2006 trial for the murders of James and Keeler ended in a mistrial, simply down to a lack of physical evidence, fibers, DNA, even witness testimony was vague at best. Though he was found guilty of lesser charges related to the burning of their corpses, there simply wasn't enough other than very shaky testimony to say that Hugo Selenski was the one who had actually murdered the 2 men. But his second trial would come around in 2015 for the murders of Michael and Tammy. And this time it went much more in favor of the prosecution from the very beginning.
The murder trial of Hugo Selenski has been on again, off again for several years. The trial delays involved numerous factors, including appeals regarding evidence. Selenski's moved to dismiss his court-appointed lawyers and briefly represent himself.
Did you want to testify? I'll talk to you at the end. Are you confident going in? I'm always confident.
This trial heavily relied on the testimony of Paul Weekly, who said he was there when they were killed. He testified he had helped kill both Tammy Fassa and Michael Kurkowski. Now, Paul Weekly, he had already been sentenced for his part in the double murders. He was facing the death sentence, but he pled guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And so when he was testifying against Hugo Selenski, he had nothing to gain. So his testimony was kind of believable. Weekly told judge that it was solely about the money that Michael Kurkowski had made selling almost 300,000 pills. Tammy Fassa was simply in the wrong place at the worst possible time. Paul Weekly said he'd actually tried to back out when they realized Tammy was there. He and Selenski knew what they were going to do at Michael Kurkowski's place. But Selenski just waved it off and said it was all going to be fine and go ahead as planned. Weekly testified that Michael had been totally taken in by Hugo. He really believed in him and thought he was trying to help him beat his trial. Selenski thought nothing more of Michael than an easy payday. Michael, he knew he was going to go down for a long time for selling, black market pills, all that kind of stuff. So he really believed Hugo was going to help him beat this whole thing. And Selenski said he would. The Selenski saga ended in a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms, plus 56 to 120 years in prison on March 27th, 2015. Naturally, Selenski appealed, but the most recent appeal was thrown out in 2023, nearly 2 decades after he was arrested.
At the Luzerne County Prison, Newswatch 16 sat down with convicted double murderer Hugo Selenski. Throughout the conversation, Selenski emphasized his innocence, saying, "As far as the verdict, it's hard to say I respect the verdict. I'll live with it. I stand by my innocence." Since his incarceration in 2003, it has been a trying time for him and his family, telling us, "I'm in the hole. It's a miserable experience, and it's harder for my family. I'm portrayed as a vicious villain, and that's wrong. I have people who love me. I'm not a monster." When asked how those bodies of Tammy Fassett, Michael Kurkowski, and others ended up in his property, he said, "That's a question I'd like an answer to."
Obviously, I have to mention the outstanding list is long of people, victims' identities, the people who were found in his backyard. It's believed that there was 12 people buried there. Only 4 of them have been identified. From the bone fragments and all, it's like 12 different people. Nobody knows who they were. By the very nature of Hugo Selenski's disposal method of burning the remains, potential DNA was completely destroyed. And he's not the type to come clean and bare his soul in hopes of finding peace for the families of the dead. So it's unlikely any of them will ever know what happened. Some have even no idea their loved ones ever met Selenski. And one of those bodies in the pit could possibly be Cindy Song, who I mentioned at the very beginning. See, Selenski was interviewed about her disappearance, and he admitted he was involved. He said him, but it was Michael Kurkowski who had actually done the killing. Right? They had been driving around early that Halloween morning of November 1st. They'd seen her and they had taken her. They had erroneously believed she was a sex worker at the time. So they dragged her into the car and Michael killed her.
A tip that she was kidnapped and killed by Hugo Selenski.
This is giving us a little bit more hope into the case, and this has been our best lead, and we're going to follow it up until we can either prove it or disprove it.
Hugo told them her body was buried somewhere in Luzerne County, but as her body has not been recovered from his backyard, or at least not identifiably so, the investigation stalled right there. Hugo said Michael Kurkowski even kept Cindy's bunny ears before locking her in a gun safe. They assaulted her multiple times over the following few days before she slowly suffocated to death inside that safe. Selenski's level of sophistication is what makes people, kind of think that there's a lot more to him than meets the eye, than we will ever find out. I'm talking rumors of snuff films, missing girls, trafficking, and a lot of accomplices of his who were never named publicly. I mean, sure, look at his house for damn sake. Does this look like the house, the home of a small-time burglar who murdered some people for money or drugs? There's even been talk of conspiracies and that people are covering for him. But back to Cindy, whose disappearance is as mysterious as Hugo Selenski's life. No one really knows what happened to her. The witness who said they saw her in Philly, they ended up changing their statement numerous times, so police were skeptical of that. The investigation slowed to a crawl with no new information, and out of all the possible leads they had, only one remains. Hugo Selenski. Despite a confession of sorts, investigators have been unable to find any more evidence that links Selenski to Song's kidnapping, and so no more charges have ever been brought. With everything else we know about him, it is extremely possible that Hugo Selenski murdered Song, and could quite possibly be one of the most prolific serial killers we know nothing about. Thank you so much for watching, it really means the world to me. I hope you enjoyed this old video, thank you, and yeah, listen, next video, be up in a couple of days, so please give it a go when it's out. But you know what, here, listen, until then, please take care of each other, take care of yourselves, because I love you. Like, yeah.